Hello there, loves. Look what I've got. Oh, I love this book. It's full of such wonderful, dark, gripping tales. Folklore, you know? Things like The Dead Hand and all kinds of crap. Oh, it's great. Little poems and all sorts. I'm just going to stop on a random page and then find the beginning of that particular tale. Okay. Okay, Tom Hickathrift. Which is going to be... I don't think I've even read this one before, so let's see what happens together, shall we? Before the reign of William the Conqueror, there lived in the marshes of the Isle of Ely a man whose name was Thomas Hickathrift. He was a poor man, a labourer, but very strong and able to do 2 days' work in one. He called his one son by his own name, Thomas, and sent him to a good school. But Tom was none too clever. Indeed, he was a bit soft in the head, and would not apply himself, so he learnt nothing. When Thomas Hickathrift died, Tom's mother went out to work. She loved her son dearly, and supported him as best she could. But Tom himself was so slothful that he would not turn his hand at anything, let alone do a good day's work. He liked nothing so much as to loaf in the chimney corner, and ate as much at one sitting as would 4 or 5 normal men. So he was a fat, lazy git, basically. I have no idea what these illustrations mean, but they're there. When he was only 10 years old... Oh, child obesity is a terrible thing. Tom was 8 foot tall? What? Hang on. When he was only 10 years old, Tom was 8 foot tall. Wow, they grew him big back then. Mind you, I think feet used to be a different measurement. Anyway, when he was only 10 years old, Tom was 8 foot tall. He measured 60 inches round the waist, and his hand was like a shoulder of mutton. Oh, so he was just fucking huge. This is accurate. I am so strange. There was no part of him that was not outsize. I bet he was popular in his late teens. One day, Tom's poor mother went to ask her neighbour, a rich farmer, if he could spare her a bundle of straw. "Take as much as you want," said the farmer, who was an honest, charitable man. Tom's mother hurried home and said to her son, "Will you go up to the farm and fetch me a bundle of straw?" "Let me be," said Tom. "No," said Tom's old mother. "Please go." "I'll only go," said Tom, "if you can borrow a cart rope for me." Tom's mother needed the straw, and saw she would not get it without humouring her son. So she went off to another neighbour and borrowed a cart rope. Then Tom got out of the chimney corner, took the rope, and walked up to the farm. He found the farmer in the barn, watching 2 farmhands thresh the corn. "My mother has told me to come up for a bundle of straw," he said. "Take as much as you can carry, Tom," said the farmer. Tom stretched out the rope on the barn floor and laid the straw along it, armful after armful. "If you go on like that," said one farmhand, "your rope will be too short to go round it." The farmer and the other lad shook their heads at Tom's stupidity, but Tom took no notice. He gathered more straw and then drew the rope round it all. "You won't be able to carry that," said one lad. "You'll weigh a whole ton," said the farmer. 20 hundredweight. "What a fool," jeered the other. By way of answer, Tom lifted the bundle and swung it onto his shoulder. He made no more of it than if it had weighed a single hundredweight, and turning his back on the farmer and his two lads, strode out of the barn. When Tom's strength became known, his neighbours gave him no rest. Well, what is a hundredweight, by the way? I have no idea. Nobody would let him go on basking by the fire, and everybody wanted to hire him to do this job and that job. Seeing how strong he was, they told him it was a disgrace that he should lead such a lazy life, and do nothing from day to day. Tom became so tired of this baiting and taunting that he set to work, disposing of one job after another. Then one day, a man came to Tom's house and asked him to help bring back a tree trunk from a nearby wood. Tom agreed, and the man hired 4 other lads besides. When they reached the fallen tree in the wood, the man and the lads placed the cart alongside it and tried to hoist it with pulleys, but they were unable to move the tree 1 inch. "Stand back, you fools," said Tom. He bent down and lifted the trunk so that it stood on one end. Then he laid it out on the cart. "There," said Tom. "There's a man's work for you." "It isn't all," said the man, marvelling. Just as they were coming out of the wood, Tom and his companions met the forester and exchanged greetings. "Can you spare a stick?" asked Tom. "For my old mother's fire." "Of course," said the forester. "Take whatever you can carry." Tom looked around and saw another fallen tree, even larger than the one lying in the cart. He humped it onto one shoulder. That's a weird way of putting it. And then he walked home with it as fast as 6 horses could have drawn it on the cart. This is so fucking weird. When Tom realised that he had more strength than 20 men, he began to enjoy himself. For the first time in his life, he made good friends with other lads. He ran races against them, and held jumping contests, and delighting in their company, went with them to fairs and meetings to see the sports and other amusements. Tom once went to a fair that had attracted every lad in the district. Some went to cudgel, some to wrestle, some to throw the hammer. For a time Tom stood and watched this sport and that sport, and then he approached a group of young men who were throwing the hammer. "Here's a manly sport," said Tom. "It is," said the young men. "Do you want to try your hand?" Tom took the hammer in one hand and tried it for weight. "Stand out of the way, then," said Tom. "Yes, yes," said the blacksmith. "Stand out of the way," said Tom. "I'm going to throw it as far as I can." "Yes, yes, Tom," jeered the blacksmith, winking at his friends. "I'm sure you'll be able to throw it a great distance." Tom grasped the hammer and threw it. It soared through the air and fell smack into a river more than 1,000 yards off. "Yes," said Tom to the blacksmith, and he smiled. "Now you can go and fetch your hammer." After Tom had shown his strength at throwing the hammer, he thought he would try his hand at wrestling. He had no more skill than an ass, and all that he did by brute force. He threw each young man who stood against him. They were done for as long as Tom took a grip on them. Some opponents he threw over his head, some he spread eagled at his feet. He never engaged in clinches and never tripped anyone. He simply picked them up and hurled them 2 or 3 yards, so that they were in danger of breaking their necks. Before long there was nobody left who was ready to climb into the ring with Tom. They all took him to be some devil come amongst them, and Tom's fame spread more widely than ever. The guy is over 8 feet tall. Why would you doubt his strength? Why would you want to... He's a behemoth! Christ, these people are crazy! Tom took such delight in sport that he would travel near or far to any fair or festival that promised cudgel play, or bear baiting, or a game of football. Which I think in those days was... Here's a large bladder full of air. Get it 3 miles that way, It doesn't matter if you kill anyone. It was such a bloody awful game back then. I kind of wish it was still like that rather than the tedium it has so become. So when he was out riding one day in a part of the country where he was a stranger, and happened to come across a group of lads who were playing football for a wager, Tom dismounted at once and watched the game for a while. One of the players miskicked the ball and it bounced towards Tom. Tom swung a leg and gave the ball such a boot that the players saw it fly through the air, and no one could tell how far it had gone and where it had come to ground. They were unable to find their ball again, and their game was ruined. First the players were astonished. Then they rounded on Tom and called him a wrecker. Tom said nothing. He walked across to a nearby house that had collapsed in a recent storm, picked up a beam and began to lay about him. All those who got in the way he either killed or stunned. The whole district was up in arms against Tom, but they were helpless. No one was able to stand up to him. It was quite late that evening before Tom made his way home. On the road, he met 4 thieves notorious for robbing people who passed that way. No one could escape them, and they robbed everyone they came across, both rich and poor. When they saw Tom, alone as he was, they thought he would be easy prey, and they would soon have their money. They were mistaken. It was the other way around. "Stand and deliver," shouted the thieves. "What?" said Tom. "What should I deliver?" "Your money, sir," they said. "My money?" said Tom. "First you must ask for it better, and second, you must be better armed." "Come," said the men. "We're not here to gossip. We're here for your money, and your money we'll have before you move from this place." "Really?" said Tom. "Well then, you must come and get it." One of the thieves thrust at Tom, but Tom grabbed his sword, which was made of trusty steel, and struck so fiercely at the others that they were afraid for their lives, and spurred their horses. Tom was not having that. Seeing one of the thieves was carrying a portmanteau behind him, and rightly taking it to be stuffed with money, Tom redoubled his efforts. He killed 2 of the thieves, and wounded the other 2 so grievously that they begged for mercy. Tom spared their lives, but took all their money, £200 in all, to sweeten his journey home. Christ! £200 back then... wow. Wow. That is a lot of money. The next day, when Tom was walking through the forest near his home, he met a brawny tinker who had a good strong staff over one shoulder, and a large dog who was carrying his bag and tools. "Where are you from?" asked Tom. "Where are you going? There's no highway here." "Mind your own business," said the tinker. "Only fools are meddlers." "Mind my own business?" roared Tom. "Mind my own business?" With that, he put his fist in front of the tinker's nose. "All right," said the tinker. "It's 3 long years now since I had a scrap. I've challenged countless men, but nobody dares fight me. As far as I can see, this whole county is full of cowards." The tinker grinned. "Though I have heard," he added, "there's a strong lad hereabouts called Tom Hickathrift. I'd like to meet him, all right. I'd like to have a turn with him." "Yes," said Tom, "and he might well get the better of you. Here he is, you've met him." "What?" said the tinker. "I am he," said Tom. "And what do you say?" "Why," cried the tinker, "I'm delighted that we've met, if only by accident. Now I can try our strength on each other." "All right," said Tom. "Let me get a twig first." "Course," said the tinker. "Hang the man who fights an unarmed man. I've got no time for that." So Tom stepped over to the nearby gate and wrenched off the diagonal bar for a staff. Then they started fighting. The tinker thrust at Tom, and Tom thrust at the tinker. They fought with the strength of 2 giants. The tinker was wearing a leather coat, and every time Tom struck him, the coat screeched. But for all that, the tinker didn't give Tom an inch. Then Tom gave the tinker a blow on the side of his head that felled him. "Now, tinker," said Tom. "Now, where are you?" But the tinker was nimble. He leapt up again and struck Tom with his staff, so that Tom staggered sideways. The tinker rained blow after blow on Tom, and then swiped at his head from the other side, so that Tom's neck cracked with the strain. Tom threw down his weapon. "You're a match for me, Tinker, and more than a match," he said. "Come home with me now." So he took the Tinker home to recover from his wounds and bruises, and from that day onward they were the best of friends. This is a weird story. Tom's fame spread far and wide, and came to the ears of a brewer in King's Lynn, who needed a good strong man to carry his beer across the marshes to Wisbech. I don't know where any of these places are. Tom was not eager to work for him, but the brewer begged him, and offered him a new suit of clothes from top to toe, as much good food and drink as he desired. So Tom at last agreed to work for the brewer, and the brewer told him exactly which way to go, for there was a monstrous giant who ranged over part of the marsh, and nobody dared go near him. Those who did he either killed or used as his servants. Tom did more work in one day than all the other men employed by the brewer did in 3. The brewer was delighted, and made Tom his chief assistant. Every day Tom carried the beer to Wisbech, and a long way it was, 20 miles along the road that skirted the marsh, and 20 miles back again. How are you going 40 miles in one day? Tom found the journey wearisome, and knew that the quickest way to Wisbech, over the land where the giant lived, would be less than half the distance. Eating so well and drinking so much strong ale day after day, Tom was half as powerful again as he had been before. And so, one morning, without saying anything to the brewer or his fellow servants, he decided he would either get to Wisbech by the quicker route or lose his life. Win the horse, as people say, or lose the saddle. Tom drove his horses and cart and flung open the gates of the marsh path. It wasn't long before the giant spied Tom and stormed up to him, intending to seize all his beer as a prize. He greeted Tom like a lion. "Who gave you the right to come this way?" he roared. "Haven't you heard that everyone is afraid of the sight of me? How dare you fling open the gates to my land just as you please?" Tom stood there and said nothing. He didn't give a fart for the giant. "Have you no thought for your life?" asked the giant. "Make an example of you for all the other rogues under the sun. You see how many heads are hanging on that tree over there, the heads of men who have trespassed against me. Your head will hang higher than the rest." "A turd in your teeth," said Tom. "You won't find them quite the same as them." "You're nothing but a fool," said the giant. "What do you think you're doing coming here to fight me? You haven't even got a weapon." "I have a weapon here," said Tom, "that will show you up for a rogue and a coward." "Right," said the giant. Then he ran into his earth cave to fetch his great club, meaning to dash out Tom's brains with the first blow. Now Tom didn't know what to do for a weapon, for he could see his whip would be little use against the giant, who was 12 foot tall and 6 foot around the waist. But while the giant was getting his club, he had a good idea. He overturned his cart and grasped one wheel and the axle tree for shield and buckler. And the giant came out of his cave and stared at Tom, amazed to see him holding the wheel in one hand and the axle tree in the other. "You're going to do a great job with those weapons," he bawled. "I've got a twig here that will beat you and your wheel and axle tree into the ground." The giant's twig was as thick as a millpost, but Tom was not afraid. He saw there was nothing for it but to kill or be killed. The giant struck at Tom with his club. Tom parried the blow with his shield, and the rim of the wheel cracked. But Tom, meanwhile, struck at the giant with his axle tree. He hit him on the side of the head and made him reel. "What?" said Tom. "Are you drunk on my strong beer already?" The giant recovered and rained blows on Tom, but Tom parried them all with his wheel so that he was not hurt at all. And he in turn struck savage blows that sweat and blood streamed down the giant's face. Being fat and foggy and almost exhausted by the long fight, the giant asked Tom, "Let me drink a little, then we'll fight again." "No, no," said Tom. "I never learned enough from my mother to be such a fool." Tom saw the giant was beginning to weary, and he felt his blows were becoming weaker, and thought it was best to make hay while the sun shone. So he assaulted the giant with one blow after another until at last he felled him. The giant roared and bawled and begged Tom not to kill him. He offered to do anything for Tom, even to be his servant, but Tom had no more mercy on him than on a wild bear. He went on hitting him until he was dead, and then he cut off the giant's head. The fuck is wrong with this guy? Then Tom went into the giant's cave and looked around. He found such a store of gold and silver that his heart leaped at the sight of it. After a while, however, he left it all as it was, and calmly continued his journey to Wisbech, where he delivered the beer just as usual. When Tom got home, he told his master, the brewer, everything that had happened. The brewer was overjoyed, but could scarcely believe his ears. "Seeing is believing," he said. "Seeing is believing." So next day, Tom and his master and most of the townsfolk of King's Lynn went out into the marsh. They came to the place where Tom had met the giant, and there Tom showed him the head and the gold and silver in the cave. They all laughed and leapt for joy, for the giant had been a great terror and threat to them all. The news of how Tom Hickathrift had killed a giant spread up and down the country. Many people came to see the dead giant and his cave. Everyone lit bonfires, and Tom was even more respected than before. Tom took possession of the cave and its contents, and everyone said he deserved twice as much. And then he pulled down the cave and with the rocks built a fine house on the same site. In the middle of a marsh. Tom gave some of the giant's land to the poor as common land. In the middle of a marsh. The rest he divided into fields and grew crops to support himself and his old mother, Jane Hickathrift. In the middle of a marsh. Tom had won a name far and wide and become the most influential man in the district. People called him Mr. Hickathrift, and feared his anger just as much as they had feared the giant before. He had manservants and maidservants. He made a deer park and erected a church dedicated to St. James, because he had killed the giant on that saint's feast day. So Tom lived a fine and happy life, visited now and then by his friend the tinker, until the end of his days. But, I mean, how do you grow crops in a marsh? How do you... That was the weirdest story I've ever heard. Wasn't creepy or menacing at all. I'm actually a little disappointed. Some of these stories are bloody terrifying. That one was just... odd. I'm not sure what to make of it, you know? My knee. What do you guys think? Fucking weird? Or actually a good story? Tell me in the comments, and if you liked this crap, be sure to subscribe. I do this kind of thing fairly regularly now. Toodles!